Dragon Con. Caro from the BritTrack here. I'm the director. And today we are going to be talking about James Bond spy class and teaching you all about the things that it takes to be an effective spy while kind of comparing it to the James Bond franchise. With me today are these lovely gentlemen. I have with me Van Plexico, author, professor, and host of On Her Majesty's Secret Service podcast. Hi, Van. How are you?
Hey, good to be back. How you doing, Caro?
I'm doing well. I also have with us Bob Nygarrd, who is a private investigator. He's a retired NYC transit police officer turned private investigator. So thank you for being with us. How are you doing, Bob?
Thanks for having me, Caro. Great to be here.
Great. And we also have with us Mike Faber, host of the Earth Station One podcast and CCO of the ESO Network. How are you doing, Mike?
Hey, Caro. It's great to be here and talking about an amazing topic, so it should be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. So let's get into it. So James Bond, being a 00, working for MI6, you kind of have to have a special set of skills outside of obviously earning your 00, which means what, Van? What does earning your 00 mean?
What's that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, what is earning your 00 mean? Like, how do you earn your 00?
Well, I guess from Casino Royale, we learned that you have to go out and make at least, what, 2 kills or something like that? And then you've earned your license to kill, which means you can pretty much kill anybody with impunity if you see fit to carry out the mission. That was a big thing, by the way, back in the 60s. People just were fascinated by the whole license to kill idea. It became a big thing, you know, that there's a license to kill. Wow. We kind of take it in stride now because we've heard it for 50 years. But that was a big deal when that first kind of came out in the books and then in the movies. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, for this panel, though, we're not talking necessarily about, having a license to kill or earning it, but we are talking about the essential skills that it takes in order to become a effective spy. So we're going to be running down a list of various topics, but we're going to start with everyone's favorite, the gadget. You've got to be good with the gadget. So, Mike, what are some gadgets that you've seen in the past that you thought were really great spy devices that you would need to have access to?
Well, if we're going off of James Bond, of course, the super spy himself, you have, items like the wristwatch with the magnet in it or with the bomb in it, or, it depends on what generation you're going through, but you have a wristwatch with a laser in it. It could be many different things. And, it always has a way to track the agent. It has a way to, of course, go through, and while you're doing it, the agent is, able to be tracked. So in case he runs into danger or something, you could find out where he is. And it's usually the wristwatch. But you also, of course, with Bond, you also have glasses that you could see through x-rays, and you could, see through briefcases. And then you also, of course, with gadgets, it's whatever Q is coming up with this week. And, it just all depends. It could be a briefcase that turns into a bomb. It could be, it depends on how it's set, or, it depends. And it got, more and more advanced as the series went on. And that was pretty cool, and then you had to be able to have all these cool gadget cars or vehicles like Little Nelly in You Only Live Twice, which was basically an ultralight helicopter, which is pretty awesome and stuff.
Yeah, Bob, what do you think? I know that you've had some fun gadgets you've had in the past.
Yeah, well, as a private investigator, I have to use different gadgets. I'm going to go with practical things, like recording devices in order to go in and surreptitiously record people. GPS tracking devices to put on vehicles so that I could follow them and know where they're going. A husband or a wife might give me permission to put it on a car that they both co-own, and then you're following the car through the GPS, So that's something that you use. Just the vehicle itself, and having a different vehicle for a different neighborhood, and having a car that fits the neighborhood, so that's important too, so that you fit into the area that you're surveilling,
Oh.
I have pens. I have pens that have video recorders in them. I have glasses, like these glasses where the video is right in the middle, and you're sitting there talking to someone, and you're recording them, and they don't realize you're recording them. So
how easy it would be to podcast if we had pens just like that. Who could just go
and I have a wristwatch that's a video recorder. I have a keychain that's looks like you have the thing on your car and you're just pushing the button to open your garage or open your car, but yet it's doing video and audio and stuff like that. So these are all practical things that you can use when doing an investigation. And that you need as a spy to gather the evidence that you need in cases.
Right. Okay. And then, so Van, what do you think about like gadgets as far as like what you need to have in your readily available to you?
Well, it's amazing to me how over the years in the Bond movies, for example, they've evolved. Like you guys were saying, you've gone from, you go all the way up to like the invisible car in Die Another Day. But if you go all the way back to the 60s and From Russia with Love, you have just this briefcase. And if you remember the briefcase in that 1963 movie, it had a little strap with gold coins on it in case you needed to bribe anybody or pay for something. And it had a throwing knife that popped out, and it had a talcum powder that was a tear gas bomb. And that was about it. I mean, that's a pretty limited, and then the watch in that one was it pulled a wire out and you could garrote somebody with it, So as Mike said, I think the watch has been the tool he's used the most. There was the wire, there was a saw that cut through a rope, there was the magnet in Live and Let Die that made the boat kind of come over in the alligators, there was the laser beam, there was the bomb in Spectre, there was the dart gun in Moonraker. He's used a watch for just about everything. But everything in between there, and I'm kind of more fond of the early ones because they really are the practical ones where it just looks like an object and he would use it for something clever. The ones later on that are super high tech, I mean, at that point, it may be real. As Bob was saying, there's stuff that seems science fiction that's real, but to me, it still just seems like science fiction. I kind of prefer the old, almost analog level of, gadgets as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I like when Judi Dench is saying to everybody, like, where is Bond now? And they're looking at him on a screen. They're trying to see where he is because he's got a tracking device on him, and they're seeing and sometimes he's trying to ditch the tracking device so that he doesn't let him know where he is.
Oh, exactly. Well, it's like how my dad used to tell me when I was a kid. He says, watch these James Bond movies, especially the ones from the first one, all the way probably through the first Roger Moore one. Most of the gadgets he has were real. And were later, were proven, were stuff that were actually in use by people and everything, which is really awesome. Because even like in Thunderball, where you had the jetpack or the scuba tank, that was real with the jet on, where it propelled you further. Or you had, I think it was You Only Live Twice, it was Thunderball where you had the jetpack, where he went outside and he just took off. And you've seen videos of that at the World's Fair and stuff like that. And it was just really awesome that you had that. But James Bond always made it bigger and better. And then it just started getting crazier and crazier as, the series went on and everything. And it also felt like, though, when they got to the newer ones, like starting with Casino Royale, they kind of brought it back to Earth and everything. Yes. The gadgets and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the little air double breather thing that he had in Thunderball. This is the funny thing. The flying rocket pack was real, but the little air tank was fake. Because like the Navy went to Saltzman and Broccoli and said, "Hey, where can we get those?" And they're like, "Oh, it's fake. We just made it up." They wanted the little double-ended air thing you put in his mouth and could breathe, and it wasn't real. It was like cartridges glued together. Yeah.
I've always wondered about one particular gadget, Bob. Is it possible? I mean, I don't really know much about this kind of stuff, but can you actually clone someone's phone? Is that a thing?
Clone the phone? Well, yeah. I mean, there's a whole thing where when I was a cop, I used to make arrests for people that had cloned phones, and what they did is they could get them. They sit on like a bridge, and they'd have a device. It was a device where they could get what they call the ESN number, and they could take it right out of the air, and then they could use that number to clone the person's phone. So yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Well,
Wow.
the show that used that the most was always Person of Interest. If you ever watched that show, they used to do that all the time on it.
Right.
And
In the early day, we had these big gray phones when they first came out, the first cell phones, and they had a little ESN number and a MIN number. We used to take a paper clip, open it up in the back, and like guys that used to sell it on the street corner, the clone phones, they used to have a little sticker on a phone underneath the battery that said how good long it was guaranteed for before, like I guarantee you could use this for 2 weeks before, if you get caught before 2 weeks, I'll give you your money back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you don't want like a giant shoe, like the shoe phone?
Yeah, we come a long way from those first big clunky phones, that's for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Max Smart with his phone that was a shoe. Hello,
Max so smart.
Yeah.
I always was like waiting for him, like any minute now, Bond's gonna have a shoe phone. It's gonna happen. But besides gadgets, another skill set that you really need as a spy is honestly just to be physically fit to handle. There's a lot of factors that go into being physically fit. So, Van, what's one thing that you would need in order to physically handle being a spy?
Well, again, if we were to use the Bond film and other spy films like that as a guide, I would say that knowing how to ski always comes in handy, because every other time he goes out, he's got to do downhill skiing with usually Russian or Spectre guys behind him shooting at him, and he's able to do it on one ski, two skis, on his bare feet, with guns in the poles shooting back, and able to jump, and maybe having a bubble that goes around him to protect him when he gets covered up in the snow. So I would say ski skills always seem to be very valuable.
Okay, Bob, what do you think?
I'd say martial arts skills, knowing how to fight, and, because he's always getting into altercations. Bond he's, needs those skills to save his life sometimes. So that's very important. Also, marksmanship skills, knowing how to shoot. I mean, that's very important. I mean, right at the beginning of the Bond movie, you have the barrel of the gun, the opening. So, I mean, that's very important, the marksmanship and the martial arts skills.
And Bob, if you combine our two, you have the biathlon, which they showed in For Your Eyes Only. Remember, the biathlon was actually a thing in that movie, where the East German guy or whatever was going around skiing and then shooting the target.
Shooting, right? Yeah.
He was a super spy, having all of those skills. What about you?
Threw a motorcycle at Bond.
Right?
He threw a motorcycle at Bond. That was hilarious.
Does that? So, okay, physical skill, lift motorcycle, throw it at people. That is
there you go.
We recommend you. Mike, what do you think you need physically? What's a physical skill?
Well, physically, you have to have great vision. You have to be able to, also you need to, like you keep on saying, you have to be physically fit. You have to know martial arts, be able to defend yourself, but you also need to be able to handle pain, be able to fight through it, to keep on going through, if you're hurt, if you're shot, if you're stabbed or something, you have to be able to keep on going. You have to, keep on going for the mission, because, I got a hangnail, I got to stop, or something. That would be something that would just not work. And you have to be able to adapt to any situation physically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think being able to swim really well. I think diving skills, we constantly see him in a wetsuit coming out perfectly dressed in his tuxedo, completely dry.
Well, you also, when you say physically fit, you also have to have stamina. And I don't mean with the women and stuff like that. to be able to have stamina, though, to keep going. If you have to run, if you have to swim, or even fight somebody, you need to be able to keep going and everything.
Right. Or in the new No Time to Die trailer, where he jumps off the side of a bridge and holds it up onto something like Tarzan, like.
Or
swing.
as he did in Diamond, or was it Casino Royale? You need to know parkour.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh man, that
about
was
just intense.
Running all that distance was amazing. Yeah, chasing that guy, just chasing him relentlessly chasing. Yeah,
and jumping from like building to building or construction site. That was just awesome.
Fearlessly. I mean, that's a big part of it, Mike. Is you have to be able to do all those physically fit things, and you have to do it without going, "Holy crap, I'm not going to jump over that."
Yeah, exactly.
Right? He never hesitates. He just bulls ahead, especially Craig. Craig is the king of just bowling ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the new one where they have on the trailer where he's swinging from this big cord off of a bridge, and you see him come swinging down. So you have to be physically fit to do that. That's for sure.
Looks good.
Yeah, and then some of those shots are like one continuously long shot, which we see. You know, we've seen Connery do it. We've seen a couple, of the other Bonds do it, especially, like you're saying, Daniel. And in this case, having that ability to have that stamina absolutely is something that you need to be as a spy. So the next kind of thing that we want to talk about is your drive skills, piloting and driving skills. So what, besides obviously the ability to drive an Aston Martin and still look really, really, really cool, what also do you need as far as drive skills? We'll start with Bob.
I mean, I'm going to go practical on you because I have to drive and follow people, and you're in a city environment, and you're hitting red lights and stuff, and you have to know, how far do I stay behind? How close do I get? Are they going to see me? Because when you're doing surveillance, you can't get made. So one of the things is, as a spy, you have to be discreet, and so that comes in with the driving skills. Is you have to be discreet in the way you drive. Now you have the crazy chase scenes. That's one thing, but I'm just talking practical. From a practical standpoint, as a real spy, when you're spying on someone, it's very important to have the driving skills of knowing how far how far you can go, what you can do, what you can't do, in order to stay with the person so you don't lose them.
Well, exactly. And you have to be able to be prepared to go to any vehicle. You might have to go from an Aston Martin to a motorcycle or a helicopter or a plane.
That's right.
Yeah. Van, what do you think as far as drive and piloting skills?
Yeah, the piloting thing to me is just because it seems like so many ground vehicles are fairly similar. If you're good enough to really skillfully drive one, you're probably okay on a lot of them. But how many times, like in Tomorrow Never Dies, he jumps in a Soviet-made fighter jet and has to take it off and fight with other jets while there's a guy in the back seat trying to strangle him. Or like you said, a helicopter. Or there's just so many times that he takes the opponent's vehicle away from him and has to know exactly what he's doing at that moment. So he's got to be a guy that can fly planes, helicopters, as well as cars, motorcycles, just basically anything that can move. He needs to not only know how to do it, but do it as well as the bad guys. And that's impressive. It borders on almost impossible how you could know that much about that many different, things. The one time he didn't, though, and I was always very impressed with this, is they didn't carry it to the absolute absurd, was that in Moonraker, the CIA lady knows how to fly the shuttle, but he doesn't. So for once, he had to kind of sit back in the passenger seat while she flew the space shuttle. I'm like, if he had gone up and gone, oh, yes, I know how to fly a 73 SPS space shuttle, he'd be like, come on now. You don't know how to fly that. Get out of here. But no, he didn't. So that was cool.
What
he even knew how to. Oh, go ahead.
What comes to mind is Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, where he's on a motorcycle. He's got the motorcycle, and then he's in a helicopter, flying a helicopter in a helicopter chase. So, that's a perfect example of how you need to have different skills to have different vehicles to keep up with somebody
in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You even need to be able to drive a car that turns into a submarine all of a sudden.
Oh, the Lotus is awesome. Yeah. Or there was the Ford that turned into an airplane. Remember that Scaramanga and
That's
Tattoo.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
You also have to drive a little mini plane off of the back of a wagon where the horse butt lifts up, and you come out and your plane wings fold out, and now you're flying.
That was Octopussy, I believe. Yeah, the little jet.
Right?
Well,
he pulls up to the gas station at the end. That's
you also
awesome.
have to be patient enough to be able to teach flying lessons at the same time, like you did in Live and Let Die.
That's right. He did do that.
That lady,
That lady was just. That's awesome.
Right? Her eyes were just so wide.
Mm.
But absolutely. Absolutely. So you do need, you know, so we talked about gadgets, physical, being physically fit and having physical skills as well as drive skills. But what about some pretty essential skills, the interpersonal skills? What do you guys think about that? We'll start with Mike. What's something that you would need?
Well, you can't be a, you know, wallflower if you're going to be a spy. You know, you got to be able to mingle and socialize with various types of people, and a good agent or spy will be able to change personalities depending on the crowd that he or she is with. And, you know, you can't always come out, you know, like Austin Powers, yeah, baby, you know, and everything. You have to be able to go and, you know, be able to mix with the scientific people and, you know, pretend that you're a, you know, a scientist or something, and be able to talk the talk and talk the walk, and then go and then be able to be in a business meeting 2 days later or something and know what they're talking to, because a lot of people will see through that if you can, and you need to be able to back everything you know up.
Oh, that's very, very true. Bob, what do you think?
I mean, James Bond knows how to charm women. I mean, that's his number one thing that he does in the movies. I mean, I know it's chauvinistic, but I mean, that's what he does, you know. He has that skill of being able to get information by being able to charm the woman into getting the secrets that he needs to get in order to find the bad guy. He usually finds the bad guy, the villain, through the woman, you know.
Yeah, or the woman finds it through the men, you know, like we've got lots of different, you know,
I always found it interesting though, because, you know, the different Bonds they've had, you know, you've gone through some very charming gentlemen who've played James Bond and everything. I don't see that as much with Daniel Craig's Bond though, which is interesting.
Yeah.
He's a thug. I mean, he's interesting, but he's not funny. He's not charming. He's just a robot on a mission. And it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages, I think. So
yeah, he brings more physicality to the role. I mean, rather than a charm.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good way to put it.
Pierce Brosnan is a guy that has charm. You know, he's a charmer. Where Daniel Craig is just a physical, you know, guy that's gonna get things the hard way. You know.
That's true. Van, what do you think are some interpersonal skills that you need as a spy?
Yeah, I was going to say, Bob, I think that Daniel Craig is the polar opposite of Roger Moore. You couldn't be more opposite spectrum, right? They're just totally opposite, right? But anyway, no, the interpersonal. You know, my favorite example I just thought of. I thought about sometimes. I mean, exactly what Mike is talking about, where Bond pops up in a like a black tie affair, and he's so suave, he can just fit right in. Nobody suspects he's out of place, you know. But the one I think is a good example of how being Bond actually kind of messes that up is in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. He goes undercover as like this super nerdy genealogy guy. He should be like, the women should be totally repelled by him, not interested at all. Just some stuffy, nerdy guy who's been researching, you know, books in the dusty library for 100 years. But he's Bond, and so all the women are all over him. And he's like, oh, I'm just researching genealogy. And they're like, oh, tell us more. You know, it's like he can't help it. He's Bond. Even when he's being nerdy, they still know. They can just tell, you know, that he's got that charisma.
Well, they threw a pair of glasses on him to make him look even more nerdy.
Doesn't matter
what they do. No, don't
going along with the interpersonal. You know, also is his gambling skills. I mean, you know, he's always in a casino a lot of times, knowing how to play cards, knowing how to gamble. You know, and that involves interacting interpersonal skills with other people and how to, you know, read them and, you know, in the gambling setting. So that's a big part of the James Bond, you know, interpersonal skills, the gambling aspect.
And absolutely. And one of the other big skills, that goes along with that is just being able to read people, right? And being a really good listener. Because it takes a lot to have a laser beam shooting between your legs and listening to the bad guy tell you his entire plot and what he's going to do, right? So as far as, right?
Well, the same with listening, and the same with questioning, how to question people to get information out of them. Like, I know just from being a cop, if I arrested somebody and I said to them, when was the last time you were arrested? They would look at me, oh, I've never been arrested. But if I said to the same person, how long has it been since the last time you were arrested? What was it, 6 months ago? No, that was at least 2 years ago. See, it's all in the way you ask the question. If you say, have you ever, then the person denies it. If you say as if you already know, then the person is more apt to give you the answer. So it's just a simple phrasing of a question, So in the Bond movies, he knows how to talk to people to get the information that he needs.
This is why we need you always on these panels, Bob.
Well, and then also a part of being an effective listener is repeating what the person has said to you and trying to get them to confirm what they're saying. One of the things that, if you notice subtly in a lot of Bond films, as well as just spy in general, is that they start with what happened last and work backwards, because it's harder to remember what you did from end to, backwards to the beginning than it is to go from beginning to end, because you've already prepared yourself for the lie. You've already said, this is what happened, and then this has happened, and what this has happened. But saying it from backwards is actually a real challenge as far as when you're trying to figure out who did it.
It's also the building a rapport with somebody. And it's also, knowing how to have that rapport. And it's also doing research on the person that you're dealing with prior to you dealing with them and knowing a little bit about their background. I mean, I'll just give you an example. When we first started, just before we came on the air, I said to Van, oh, you got all those books behind you, look like a professor. And he said, oh, I just so happen to be a professor. Well, I did a wiki search on Van before I got on the air, and I found out he was a professor. So that was a loaded question, Van. That was a loaded.
He's such a sneak.
So that was a sneaky move on my part, but I'm just giving you an example,
Well done.
Very well played, Mr. Bond.
So within this category of being an effective listener, we mentioned it briefly, but being really persuasive, getting people to do things for you or with you in some capacity, and being so persuasive to get what you need out of it. Like, how do you do that? Why is that such an essential skill? Let's start with Van.
Well, you mean how does a spy go about getting somebody to tell you what you want to know? Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's a matter of being able to read them and figure out the keys, right? I'm sure Bob is much better at that than the rest of us. But I mean, what he usually does, like we were saying with women, is he convinces them that he's on their side, they should be on his side, and clearly think about like Domino in Thunderball. She's with the bad guy, and he has to kind of pry her away and get her to see the other side. Oftentimes it'll involve that he finds out that the bad guy is actually taking advantage of her or tricking her or blackmailing her, and maybe she doesn't even know it. So I think that it's really just he uses that spy ability of gathering knowledge to be able to work somebody and persuade them that he's the good guy and they need to be on his side.
I mean, I could give you an example of that. I had a case one time in Newcastle, Long Island, where there was a murder, and someone shot somebody, and it was actually two guys shot a guy, and it was like 30 people in the neighborhood that saw this, but nobody was coming forward. And one of the ways I actually solved the murder, my partner and I, because we pulled the guy over one day. We pulled a lot of people over on traffic violations when they committed traffic violations that we thought were in the area when it happened. And then we had this young guy. So he's a young guy. He has a really nice tricked out car, and he had a lot of violations on his car. So what we did, I said, I'm going to impound your car now and take it away, because I'm going to take it to the impound yard. He said, please don't take my car, whatever you do. So you got to know what's important to that person. And I said, well, you know, your car's gone unless you got some information for me on something. And then all of a sudden the little light bulb went on and he said, hey, listen, can I rip up the tickets? Can I get in the back of your car? I said, oh, really? Get in the back of the car. He said, listen, I know who did the murder. And he gave me the name of the murderer because he didn't want his car impounded.
There you
so
go.
Here you go. You got to know what somebody wants. You got to know what makes them tick. You got to know what's important to them, because that's when they're going to give you something, when there's something in it for them. Otherwise, you're not getting it.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty. What do you think, Mike?
No, I agree. It's, you know, it's how to be able to charm a person. And, you know, Bond is one of those people who can charm their way into any situation. Find that very similar to, not to pull Doctor Who into it, the Doctor does that quite a bit. You know, he always, you know, reassures people that he's on their side and everything. And, you know, he or she is able to fit in the situation. But Bond is able to do that, you know, like you said, multiple people on the panel have said that, you know, Bond is able to pull a lot of times the women over to his side, even though, you know, he might only be using them for an overnight or something. You know, look at Goldfinger, how many people he did that with and everything. And, you know, it just goes to show that when Bond wants something, he can get it from anybody pretty much.
I would say that one of the things that an audience likes to see is that Bond does it in a way where he gets the information by charming people, where the villain gets it through fear. The villain tortures somebody in order to get the information. And we all say, oh, how terrible is that, to use that fear to get
what a bad, evil man. You know,
get that. But Bond is doing it. We say, oh, how clever, you know? So that's a big part of what it's all about, you know?
And you know, there's such a great example. I hadn't even thought of it just now, in the very first one in Dr. No, and I've talked about this a couple of times on my podcast, where it's the first one, and yet the way he treats the lady on Jamaica or wherever they are, the way he treats her is so Sean Connery, and I don't think Bond ever treats a woman that way again. But it's like he goes to her house knowing that she's up to no good, and he's just going to have fun with it. And so he spends the whole evening getting information out of her while romancing her. And he's just being so dismissive of her. She's like, I want to go out to dinner. No, I'll fix you a nice dinner here. He's like, no, I want to go out. And he's just like, you know, he's so dismissive. And then at the end, when she's giving him all the information, he calls the police. It comes and they drag her away. And she's like, you son of a, and he's like, you know, bye. So that's the only time I remember him actually like spending hours getting the information from the woman, and then like letting the authorities carry her off to jail. Usually he like is nice to them or something, and then later they end up, you know, getting betrayed or murdered. Like the example on that side would be in Moonraker, where that poor lady, the French lady that helps him, and the dogs eat her or whatever. My gosh, you know. So, she definitely paid the price for getting with Bond and helping him.
Oh, there was a few of those in different movies that they've done that. You know, starting in Goldfinger, if you think about it, the young lady who helped Bond spy on Goldfinger, you know, she got the golden treatment, literally.
Yeah, well, I mean, another thing is that, you know, Bond sometimes appeals to people's pride, to their vanity, you know, things like that. Their greed, you know, that's all things that a spy does. A spy appeals to those basic human instincts that people have in order to get what they need, you know.
And he usually figures out what game they like and tries to beat them at that, or make them angry at that.
That's where the gambling comes in. The gambling. Yeah.
Whether it's Goldfinger playing cards, which is what got her killed, or golf, or whether it's, you know, there's a number of different times that he plays the game of the villain, and then ends up making them so angry that they slip up and reveal something. That's his big thing, is being a provocateur. You know, he likes to go up to the villain and drop some casual knowledge that either is or isn't a clue, and the villain's always like, what does he know? You know, that's what he's doing. He ruffles the feathers to see what will happen. That's what he does.
Excellent point.
Yes.
So being able to like push someone to the edge, but hold them back enough to get them to do or say whatever it is that they're. And it's interesting because the villains that we see throughout the Bond franchise are either obsessed in some way, shape, or form with Bond, and either getting one over on him or making sure that he knows exactly what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. And you see this with almost every single Bond villain, right?
Sure.
He pokes them until they do that. He makes them angrier and angrier, because that's one of the things about the Bond villains is that they come across as they want to be perceived as suave and cool like Bond, right? But they never are. They never are. But they want to project this image of I'm the coolest person in the room. And so Bond just knows how to, you know, poke on them until that facade cracks and that real personality, because they're always psychopathic. And if he cracks that facade, the psychopath comes out, and then he's got an advantage on him. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And that's the cool thing, because there's a couple times that Bond and the villains actually get along and, you know, almost see eye to eye. And then Bond just almost like pushes just a little further to, you know, set him off.
I mean, there's a famous scene in a movie with Tom Cruise and the guy that goes to the where he says, "You can't handle the truth." You know that one?
Oh, Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
And he pushes him to the point where he gets him. He knows, how am I going to get that information out of him? And he's not going to win this case unless that critical moment comes where he gets that information and gets him to crack. And he says, you know, he pushes him. He knows just how to poke him to get him to explode and say, "You can't handle the truth." You know?
No,
so
exactly.
That's a perfect example of it. You know,
it's the total ego thing. He pushed on what he knew, the power that, you know, he cherished his rank. And, you know, that he was above everybody else, and that he was able to do it. And Tom Cruise was able to use that against him in that movie, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty impressive. And another impressive skill that a good spy has is being some sort of foodie or a sommelier and just knowing what it is and how to order it really, really well, which is what you see in a lot of scenes in the novels, right? There's at least a page or two where he calls room service and orders a spread, and you just like, man, I want to join him for dinner. So why is that so important? Let's start with Van. Why is it so important to have this skill?
But, well, I'm going to say there's reasons why it's important for Bond, but first I want to say there's reasons why it's important for the reader in those, because those books were written in the 50s largely, when, you know, you're post-World War II, and people were not, you know, England in particular was devastated. They were still rationing food. They didn't have any money. And so there was a whole generation of young men, mostly coming of age in England, that wanted to see the world, that wanted to know all these exotic things, and they couldn't. And they could vicariously live through all this through Bond, because Bond had basically an unlimited expense account through MI6. So he could go and do all these things that other guys could only just dream of. And the thing that made it so cool was that Ian Fleming understood that it's one thing to tell the reader Bond is off having a great meal. It's another to go through and list all the brands. Because now it becomes, you know, this was the same appeal, honestly, that Playboy had back in those days. You know, they used to say people read it for the articles. There really were a whole lot of people that would read Playboy because they would go through and list, here's all the cool things young, cool guys are, you know, here's what you eat, here's what you drive, here's what you wear, you know. It was that same idea of, I want to be cool, Bond is cool, and Bond will show me the things to know, the things to eat, the things to buy that'll make me cool. And in terms of the story itself, I think it's really, like we were saying before, he wants to be able to fit in. And if he's going to these fancy occasions to try to get up close to the villain and provoke him and everything, or to find the woman and kind of pry her away and all these things we've been talking about, part of the skill set of being able to do that is knowing your way around, being able to maneuver around, ordering food, ordering wine, knowing. I mean, you know, again, Roger Moore took it to kind of absurd length, because Moore was, it was either Moore or Connery that was, you know, I mentioned before, he tasted some brandy and he's like, oh, that's a so-and-so vintage. And the person's like, aha, there is no vintage on brandy bond. He's like, oh no, sir, I was talking about the wine on which the brandy was based. And he's like, oh, for crying out loud. So he always has the answer, you know, and he knows it.
Of course he does. And that's the great thing about it. I would love to have been the person to watch him blindfolded taste testing and having to, you know, being there and going, okay, Mr. Bond, now what is this? And he was like, oh, this is blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, and, you know, just having to feed him that way and everything. It would have been awesome.
One thing you see in the spy movies a lot of times is the spy knowing food. I'm going to go a little outside the topic, but they know the food because they might be getting poisoned, and they have to know how it smells or it tastes to know whether it's good or bad and whether it's a trap, you know? So that's one of the things of knowing food and knowing drinks and knowing when something isn't right with the food or the drink, so that you don't fall victim to the bad guy, you know?
Well, and if you get trapped in the woods somewhere and you need to forage for food.
That's true. Now, that'd be something that his military training would definitely have taught him for sure. But I was going to ask, do you think that that applies only like to the high-end stuff, that Bond only prepares for high-end stuff because that's what he's usually around? In other words, if he had to go up against a villain and he had to know the difference between a Big Mac and a Whopper, do you think he'd be like, oh, that's clearly a Whopper? You know, or would he be like, I don't know, it's some American fast food? I mean,
I think he'd be lost. He'd be lost.
Exactly.
It's limited part of the character.
Yeah. Exactly. I would have loved to have seen him in Live and Let Die, you know, when he was, you know, in New Orleans and he had to, all right, which kind of po' boy is this, Bond? You know?
Exactly, yeah.
Those are Cheetos, not cheesy foods.
I mean, as a private investigator, I've eaten in five-star restaurants in New York City, you know, doing surveillance, and I've eaten at Popeye's chicken, you know. So, I mean, it's both, you know, you have to do both.
Oh, it's definitely a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, not a Popeye.
Well, I mean, and, you know, he's got to know his way around, you know, a good cocktail, right? Like one of the big things about, you know, about James Bond is shaken, not stirred, and the way that which is really interesting because he doesn't order it very often in the movies, right? Sometimes when he's drinking, he's usually just has like a whiskey or something. But he always knows even how to order for the other person in some way, shape, or fashion.
Well, one thing spies often have is the high tolerance for alcohol. So you see the other person can't hold their liquor, and then they give up information where the spy is holding his own, you know. So
or he's like drinking it, you know, like throwing it away. Or the trick of, you know, having something else in your glass besides, like, it's like sarsaparilla or something like a tea.
I think that my favorite Daniel Craig moment ever was all the other Bonds had practiced, you know, shaken, not stirred. You know, there's clips where Pierce Brosnan is practicing how to say it the first time or whatever, because he really wants to nail it. But then you get Daniel Craig, who's just been through hell, you know, and he comes up and he says, I want a vodka martini, and the guy goes, shaken or stirred, and he goes, do I look like I give a damn? There you go, right?
You know, I was just thinking about the gadgets combined with the drinking, because I have an Aquafina water bottle that is a video camera. So when I'm talking to somebody, and the thing is, the Aquafina water bottle, you could actually put water in the bottom and the top of it and screw it off, so it looks like you are actually drinking the water, but it's nothing in the middle, and that's where the camera is. So you know, I'm just thinking, it came to mind as we were talking about, you know, going back to the gadgets with the drinking.
Yes, very true. So one of the final things we're going to share with our audience about how to be a spy like a James Bond is one thing that we kind of all agree is super, super essential and important, is to be a really well-rounded learner, an avid reader, and be really, really well-read, right? I mean, you got to be good at math if you're going to be doing something last minute, or know the sciences at least, right? So what do we think about that, Mike?
Well, you have to walk the walk, basically, you know, and probably 90% of being a spy is being able to know the background, being able to know the situation, being able to know what these people are working on. And then we mentioned earlier, being able to fit into any situation. They need to be learned to be able to know what is going on in the situation, but they also need to know, say they need to go to this one small rinky-dink country in Eastern Europe and get microfiche of a bomb that's being built or something. And the spy though needs to know what he's looking for and what, the information. So probably every evening he, after he wines and dines his girlfriend or lady of the night, he probably is in his room studying and reading up on information on what he has to know and everything. And he has to be he or she has to be a fast learner on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, like how to disarm a bomb, how to crack a safe. These are things where you have to learn and read about it to learn how to do it, because, you get in a situation, you got to crack the safe now. You have to disarm the bomb now. These are the things, the skill set, in the bomb.
Right. Lock picking, which is
oh great.
I've tried it once. It's really hard to do, actually. It's a challenge because you see it all the time where they're just like, and then the door opens.
Oh yeah.
We had to do it at an escape room. It was just
as a cop, people would call me and say, "Hey, listen, can you come and help me? I lock my keys in my car," And it's something simple. In the beginning, when I first became a cop, I couldn't do it. But I'd call for a guy I know was a car thief. He'd come down and do it in 2 seconds with a Slim Jim and stick it in there and be like, "Okay." I locked him up for car theft before, but I'm friends with him now, so I call him down and he helps me out in 2 seconds.
Definitely. But as far as being like educated, what would you say would be a prime one, Bob, that you would need? What area of expertise would you need to fit in MI6?
You need the science. I mean, you just need, and also just the technical skills with the gadgets. M gives you, they give you a gadget, and then you need to know how to use it. You need to know how to operate it. So it just does. You don't just operate it, in 2 seconds. It comes a certain skill set behind that. So I'd say kind of like a jack of all trades with knowing how to have a mechanical skill. That's what I would say. So that you can operate different things.
All right, Van, what do you think?
Well, Q always tries to explain it. And
right.
Bond's like, "Oh, it's fine." Goes, and Q's like, "But I didn't tell you how to do." But no, if for no other reason than to hold his own in these meetings with M and whoever's there, because again, Roger Moore was so great at this. He's not my favorite or the best, but I just think he was so good at certain things. And this was a classic. It's like, it was always the same with Roger Moore. M would be there, Roger would come in as Bond, and there'd be some expert there from a jewelry store or a space agency or something, right? And M would say, "So, 007, what do you know about blah, blah, blah?" And Roger would be like, "Oh, not much, sir." And then he'd go, "Except this. Right. And the other person's always like,
right.
And M is like, "You're insufferable, 007." Because he knows, it's like he psychically knows what the next mission is going to be before it even happens. And he's so ready. It's either that or he just somehow knows everything and is totally prepared. And I think that's kind of what Bob is getting at, is that you kind of have to be broad enough that whatever comes your way, you're going to be at least somewhat prepared and have some knowledge ready to go on it. So,
well, one of the things that comes to mind, Van made an excellent point, though, that I didn't think of, is in the movies, there is kind of a running gag that Bond gets the gadget and then he doesn't know how to really use it. He doesn't take the time. And then all of a sudden he's in the middle of it. It hits the fan and here he is fiddling with it. And a lot of times it gets all messed up and then he ruins the gadget, whatever it is, the car, he crashes, he messes it up because he didn't know how to use it. So that is true. That's like a running gag in the Bond movies of him not knowing,
Was it Inspector that he had somebody else's supercar? And it starts like playing a playlist of music and stuff, and he's like, "What's
going on?" Yeah, he doesn't know. That's the gag. He doesn't have the knowledge. Right. Like, he's such a learned guy. He's such a knowledgeable guy when it counts. But then they always throw that in there, that scene where he doesn't know what the heck he's doing. And I think that gives an appeal for the audience, because everyone feels like they can't be Bond all the time in their life, and Bond can't figure it out either. He's having trouble too. And I think that works well. That works well with the audience.
Don't want to overdo it, but every now and then.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's one of the cool things with Bond, though, is he also was able to, he's learned on the different cultures around the world, too. which we haven't really talked about, is, you know, he knows all the different cultures, and he knows, you know, to dress a different way or act a certain way when he's in that country. And, you know, he knows, you know, what to expect. And that's also a lot of prep he has to do.
Like the short robe that he wears.
Yeah, Mike makes an excellent point, because they take place in so many exotic places. The show, you know, the Bond movies. So he has to know the food from those places. He has to know the, you know, the climate in those places. He has to know the people. He has to know the language. You know, all of these different things. And you know, they cover such a wide gamut. He has to be worldly. I mean, that's the whole thing.
And then knowing all those languages alone, right? I mean, like he speaks Bosnian at one point, right? Crazy. Like wide range of just having that skill set of being so, I mean, I wonder what, like on his CV, like the list of languages that he would have.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's so important. I mean, just as a police officer, you know, my partner was Puerto Rican, and he was, you know, fluent in Spanish, you know. So, I mean, when we went to a call, you know, he had the upper hand on most guys because he knew the language, you know, and so we'd get called everywhere because of him, because he knew the language. But I mean, we would solve cases that no one else solved at that time because he was, you know, could speak fluent Spanish.
Exactly. And that's always to the advantage, because the bad guys could be, you know, whispering to each other in the native language, and, you know, thinking that, you know, Bond doesn't know it, and he's reading and hearing everything that they're saying, which is
we want information on where did the bad guy go, which way did he run, you know, or what information do you have. And sometimes it's critical to find that information right away. And my partner would be able to talk to the person right on the street corner and get the information, and then we'd have the upper hand on everybody else that didn't know the language, you know. So
sure.
And it's not just being able to speak it, but read it, write it, being able to fully understand that language is a big part of it. Well, that's a lot of skills that a person will need to be a spy like James Bond. And I really appreciate you guys talking shop with me today. And thank you so much for being here. And as far as where people can find you or anything that you want to share, Mike, where can people find you?
People can always find me over on Facebook under ESO Network, or of course, esonetwork.com.
Okay. And then Bob, where can people find you if they're looking for a private investigator?
Yeah, they just Google my name. Just Google Bob Nygard, and you'll see my Twitter come up, and it'll have my phone number on there, and they can get me through that.
So it's not Nygard, Bob Nygard?
No. no, it's not Nygard. Bob Nygard. No.
And Van, where can people find you at?
The easiest place is, I'm on Twitter, Allen Plexico, but you can just go to www.plexico.net. There you go.
Awesome. Well, thanks, DragonCon, for being with us in our James Bond spy class. You can find the BritTrack on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. And we are on YouTube. We will be streaming over the course of the weekend. Well, I hope you enjoy your weekend. And thanks for stopping in with us to talk about James Bond. Bye, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.